When I was a child, my brother would tell me a bedtime story about the man who murdered our father, who stabbed him in the back and cut his throat, who sat down on the Iron Throne and watched as his blood poured onto the floor.
Hey, what's up guys, it's Aladdin. Last night's episode of Game of Thrones Season 8 revealed so much that we gotta break down. Just as I did for last week's episode of Episode 1, I'll also be giving you my top 10 WTF moments as well as including some little things that you guys probably missed. But before I get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It definitely helps out the channel grow and lets others like you stay tuned with the latest shows and movies. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you guys can get notified right away when I drop my next video. This won't exactly have any particular order, but I'll just go off by what I thought was my top 10 WTF moments in last night's episode. So let's begin. Number 10. Sir Jorah talks to Lyanna Mormont plus Sam gives Jorah his sword Heartsbane. This reunion was another highly speculated reunion that fans were hoping to see. The two cousins finally came together and met each other. Sir Jorah brought shame to his house when he fled Westeros to escape execution for trading slaves and then took up work as a mercenary in the Free Cities. Obviously his father Jorah Mormont isn't here to see him now since he did die back in Season 3 Episode 4 by his own men. It was actually quite nice seeing Jorah and Lyanna Mormont together for the first time. Jorah was trying to convince Lyanna to head into the crypts for protection against the dead, but she refused and said that she pledged to fight for the North and wants to fight the dead alongside her men, which I truly respected, but at the same time I really don't think Lyanna is a fighter like the rest of the Northern men or even like Aria. It'll definitely be quite interesting to see her fight alongside her men as well as Sir Jorah if she decides to fight alongside with him. Sam ends up overhearing Jorah and Lyanna talking, where he ends up actually joining the conversation and asks Jorah if he'll take his family's sword Heartsbane into battle against the dead. Sam ended up telling Jorah that he isn't strong enough to swing the sword, so he'd rather give it to him where he knows it'll be in good use. Plus, it's Valyrian steel, so it'll be really good when using it against the White Walkers and the dead. Jorah did have a Valyrian steel sword in his family called Longclaw, but his father ended up giving it to Jon back in Season 1 Episode 9, which is still the main sword Jon uses at the current moment. Number 9. Theon and Sansa's reunion. This reunion was quite emotional just because these two both have endured so much pain and torture from Ramsay back in Season 4 and 5 to the point where they were nearly broken. Theon ended up putting his life in danger as well as Sansa to help her escape Ramsay's torture and all. Ever since that, Theon has been on the road to redeem himself from all the mistakes and pain he's brought to House Stark, so what better way to redeem himself than come back to Winterfell after saving his sister to fight alongside Jon and Sansa against the dead. Sansa hasn't seen Theon since Season 5 where he helped her escape Winterfell from Ramsay when Ramsay was in control, so it's been nearly 3 seasons since these two have seen one another. The reunion was definitely touching and you can really tell Sansa truly did miss Theon and was actually excited to see him back in Winterfell. There was actually a rumor going around that Theon and Sansa might have a thing for one another, which I'll actually make a video later discussing on that matter and giving you my insights on what I think about it. Number 8. Tyrion in the group counseling. Later in the episode we see Tyrion, Jaime, Brienne, Podrick, Ser Davos, and Tormund in a room warming up against a fire. This scene was quite hilarious yet emotional. Tormund ended up telling a story about how he killed a giant and then slept with the giant's wife and sucked on her tits, which was automatically the highlight of the conversation. But it wasn't until he started chugging his drink while it was pouring down his shirt, making everyone uncomfortable besides Tormund. He also made a comment towards Jaime saying they call you King Killer, which I think he probably meant to say King Slayer, but then again Tormund doesn't give a shit. Tormund also made a comment towards Brienne asking her if she were a knight and she replied with, "Women can't be knights, it's just tradition," and then Tormund replied with, if he were a king he would knight her 10 times over. Where then we saw Jaime actually step up and showcase that a knight can make another knight. He ended up telling Brienne to kneel so he can certify her as an official knight. They ended up doing the ceremony actually, where then Jaime certified Brienne as an official knight of the 7 kingdoms. And lastly, we found out that Podrick can sing, and I mean he can really sing. Number 7. Jaime gets confronted by everyone. Right off the bat with episode 2, we see Jaime in the Great Hall of Winterfell getting confronted by Daenerys as well as Sansa. Daenerys gets right to it and tells Jaime how her brother Viserys would tell her stories about a man who ended up murdering their father from the back and then sitting on the throne afterwards. Jaime was mainly frozen throughout the trial until Tyrion jumped in to defend him by saying that he wouldn't even be here if he wasn't willing to actually fight for the right cause. Daenerys automatically assumed that Jaime was lying just because Cersei lied to her about not sending her troops up north to fight the dead, which is why she's being very skeptical about Jaime right now. Brienne also jumps in and defends Jaime by telling everyone the stories and adventures that the two went through back in Season 3 and 4. Brienne also tells Daenerys about how Jaime came back to save her from almost getting raped and being mauled by a bear. Brienne also tells Sansa that without Jaime she wouldn't have ever found her nor would have been able to help her if it weren't for Jaime asking her to find her and protect her. That was a wish as well as an oath that Jaime made for Catelyn Stark to protect their girls. Jaime has definitely had one hell of a character arc throughout Game of Thrones, which I also think was the best character development throughout the whole series. I'm just glad they didn't drag his trial too long and got right to it in the opening scene. Number 6. Jaime and Brienne together once again. This whole episode felt like it was dedicated towards Jaime and Brienne just because we saw 3/4 of Jaime throughout the whole episode. Right in the beginning with his trial, later in the middle with him bonding with Tyrion and Brienne, and then lastly where he was with the oddly but satisfying group gathered around the fire. Jaime and Brienne have had one of the best, if not the best, relationships in the show. These two started off not liking one another, which ended up having them duel each other and even confront each other at their lowest points, but throughout time we've seen these two slowly build a mutual respect towards one another and even care for each other. I truly do think that Jaime will die in the arms of Brienne in the Battle of Winterfell, and to even back that up now, we saw that in this episode Brienne will be controlling the left flank of Winterfell where Jaime wants to be a part of her command to fight with her. This would actually make sense now since he does want to be put under her command, which I'm calling it right now. We will see one of the two die in the arms of the other, which I really think it might be Jaime dying in her arms. We also saw Jaime grant Brienne the title of a knight. That scene was quite emotional just because it's always been traditional for men to become knights, but as Tormund said it best, fuck tradition, and that's when Jaime proved it too and told Brienne to kneel and then said the words and made Brienne a knight of the Seven Kingdoms. One thing Game of Thrones has never been shy about is proving women can be just as capable as men at doing whatever they desire. There should never be a barrier between men and women, and Game of Thrones has proved that countless of times. Number 5. Sansa and Daenerys have a one-on-one conversation. We finally saw the two together sitting down and discussing matters like Jaime, Jon, and even the North. Daenerys ended up finally having a one-on-one conversation with Sansa, and at first it was a little bit awkward just because Sansa had no idea what to expect from Daenerys. Plus, Daenerys had this feeling that Sansa didn't like her, which is why she asked if they had any beef of some sort. Sansa mainly said that Jon loves you and that men do stupid stuff when they're in love, which is true, but also Sansa had a great point there just because Jon did bend the knee to Daenerys, but was it for the right reason or was it because he fell in love? That's essentially where Sansa is getting at with Daenerys, is that Jon mainly bent the knee for her because he was in love with her. Daenerys ended up telling Sansa that she put her war against Cersei on pause so she can help Jon fight the dead, which then she tells Sansa who do you think manipulated who now? Which was a strong point for Daenerys, but it still doesn't mean anything because Sansa really wants to know what will they do after they defeat the Night King and Cersei. That's where Sansa was getting a little more tense and serious because she already lost Winterfell once due to Ramsay and promised that they would never bow to anyone else, and now you got Daenerys who wants her to kneel and accept her as queen. I personally am hating this version of Daenerys right now just because she is constantly bringing her throne claim and telling everyone that she is the rightful heir to the throne. Like, chill Daenerys, we get it already. Number 4. Bran and Jaime at the Godswood tree. Ever since Jaime arrived back at Winterfell, we've all been waiting for the reunion between him and Bran. They first encountered each other in last week's episode right at the end when Jaime arrived at Winterfell and Bran was sitting outside in the courtyard waiting for him. Jaime hasn't been at Winterfell since season 1, which is crazy considering at that time he was a huge douche, but after 8 seasons now he's one of the fan favorite characters with an unbelievable character arc. The episode started off with Jaime getting confronted by Daenerys and Sansa over his past mistakes and all, and later Bran ends up saying the things we do for love, which is the same thing Jaime said to Cersei back in season 1 episode 1 right as he pushed Bran out the window. That moment left Jaime speechless just because he didn't know if Bran even remembered what he said back then. Later in the episode, we see Bran at the Godswood tree just sitting there when out of nowhere, Jaime comes and sees him where he then apologizes for what he did to him back in season 1. He also asks Bran why he didn't tell everyone about what he did to him, and Bran simply says that he wouldn't be able to help them out against the dead if they murdered him right away for what he did. He then asks, what about afterwards, as in, are you gonna tell them afterwards about me pushing you out the window? And Bran hits him with the, how do you know there will be an afterwards, implying how do you know you'll be alive to find out that answer since you'll be facing death soon. I was actually pleased with this scene and I'm glad they went this direction with the two characters just because both are two different people now. Number 3. Arya and Gendry romance. Now this I definitely expected to happen. Arya has been giving Gendry the sexual looks since the beginning of season 8 and she has been flirting with him ever since. But I had no idea that she would actually have a sex scene with Gendry. I always assumed Arya wasn't into all that until she hit us with that line, I want to know what it's like before that happens, and boom, she has her sex scene with Gendry. It's just crazy talking about it because all these years we've seen her grow up as a little child transitioning to a faceless assassin, and then this happens. It was just a huge shocker to me. Plus, a nice little Easter egg about this scene was Gendry also told Arya that he was the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, and that Robert also told Ned Stark, I have a son, you have a daughter, we'll join our houses. Which literally, if Robert and Ned were alive, it would have been a wish come true for Robert, plus I think Ned would have approved of Gendry. Number 2, Jon tells Daenerys about his true self. This has been one of the most anticipated scenes that all fans have been waiting for. We finally saw Jon tell Daenerys who he really is and who his true parents are. I truly feel like they executed this scene perfectly, but at the same time cut it out too short. Daenerys ended up going down to the crypts of Winterfell where she saw Jon standing by a statue, which in this case he was looking at his mother Lyanna. She asks Jon who this is, and Jon says this is Lyanna Stark, where then Daenerys tells Jon a story about Rhaegar and how she heard stories about how he raped Lyanna Stark. Jon ends up telling Daenerys that the stories weren't true and that he actually loved Lyanna and got married in a secret ceremony with her that no one knew, and that when Rhaegar fell at the trident, Lyanna had a son. And if Robert Baratheon ever found out, he would have murdered the baby, so the last thing she did as she bled on her deathbed, she told her brother Ned Stark to protect the baby from Robert Baratheon. But that wasn't all. Jon also told her that his real name is Aegon Targaryen. Now automatically Daenerys doesn't believe it, but Jon tells her that it's true, that Bran saw it, as well as Sam can confirm it from reading it at the Citadel. She goes off by telling him that if it were true that he would be the last male heir of House Targaryen, meaning he would have a claim for the Iron Throne. Obviously Daenerys doesn't want it to be true just because if it were, Jon would have a higher chance on the Iron Throne than her. And she's been working her ass off for 8 seasons now for the throne. For Jon to just drop this huge bomb on her would just shatter everything she's been working for. I personally would like it if the two got married and just decided to rule together and break the wheel, as Daenerys has been saying in the past few seasons now, and start up a whole new ruling system. It'll definitely be weird now since she does know the truth about Jon and who he really is when moving forward. I just hope we don't see any conflict between the two, because that's just gonna be a waste of time and nonsense. Number 1, what the Night King truly wants. After 8 seasons now, we finally know what the hell the Night King wants and who his target is. I made a video on this a couple weeks ago. You guys can check out that video on the top right here if you haven't seen it yet. I'll also leave a link in the description so you guys can check it out later. But as Jon and the other remaining characters were discussing strategies for the Night King, Bran ends up telling everyone that the Night King will expose himself going after him. He says the Night King has been going after all the three-eyed ravens in the past and that he wants to get him now since he's the current new three-eyed raven. Sam ends up asking him why, what does he even want, and Bran simply says he wants an endless night, he wants to erase the world, I am his memory. It all definitely makes sense now. It makes sense as to why the Night King has been going after Bran for a couple of seasons now. Bran has a mark from the Night King, meaning the Night King knows exactly where Bran is and wherever he goes. He wants to kill Bran so he can erase all memories from the past and just have a long night of death. The Night King will not stop until he gets his hands on Bran, so Bran decides to lure him at the Godswood tree, where then maybe Jon or someone can take him out in a one-on-one combat. If that's the case exactly, it's gonna be one hell of an epic battle between Jon and the Night King. Only problem is they have no idea how to kill the Night King, whether they use dragon glass, Valyrian steel, or even dragon fire. But one thing that we know that will be official is that Theon and his men will be with Bran at the Godswood tree if the Night King does end up going there. There were also other notable moments that I was going to include, like Grey Worm and Missandei wanting to head somewhere south once they defeat the dead and Daenerys takes the throne, also the Hound and Aria reunion part 2, as well as Sir Davos and the little girl with grayscale on her face. Also, can't forget that crazy ass story that Tormund told about sucking on a giant's tit. This episode had a ton of information as well as reunions that were impactful and empowering. I'm really liking the pace that Game of Thrones is going with Season 8. We only have 4 episodes left of Season 8, but with those 4 episodes, they're going to be over an hour and a half long, essentially meaning we're going to see more action and drama between our favorite characters and also where their fate lies. But tell me, what did you guys think about episode 2 of season 8? How is it compared to the first episode? Are you guys excited for the Battle of Winterfell next Sunday? Leave all your comments in the comments section and let me know what you guys thought about episode 2 of season 8. I just want to say thank you all for watching, and if you haven't already, hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't by now. If you don't mind, share the video if you thought it was good and want others to see it. Watch my other videos containing Game of Thrones season 8 in the next video. I'll have more Game of Thrones content up in the upcoming days, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all once more, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.
The halls of the kings who are gone, Jenny would dance with her ghost, the one